Welcome back guys, thanks a bunch for checking out this video right here on Most Amazing Top 10. My name's Danny Berg and today I want to talk to you guys about the thing that's just appeared right behind me. Yeah, the Golden Gate Bridge. What is it? A bridge. Where is it? San Francisco, California, USA. And I can hear you guys already asking, is it famous, this Golden Gate Bridge? Why, yes it is. It's very famous indeed guys. Some would say it's the most famous bridge in the world. There's some bonus facts for you about it, but now let's get into this with our top 10 things you need to know about the Golden Gate Bridge. At number 10, the Golden Gate Bridge took 4 years to build. Construction started on January the 5th, 1933 and was officially opened on May 28th, 1937. It stretches over a kilometer across the Golden Gate Strait, a body of water that was named by a surveyor who said it reminded him of a harbour in Istanbul called the Golden Horn. Now there are a lot of bridges longer than this one these days. For example, the Danyang Kushan Bridge in China was completed in 2010 and it's about 60 times the length of the Golden Gate Bridge. Mental. So it's not big by today's standards, but at number 9, before the Golden Gate Bridge was completed almost 80 years ago, people actually said it would be impossible to build. Now the people of San Francisco had always talked of a bridge that would link San Francisco to Marin County, but the dimensions of it seemed just too big to overcome. The gap between those 2 points is over 2 kilometers with waters that are over 100 meters deep. They said powerful winds and dense fog would make it difficult to build and maintain a bridge, and it would be just 12 miles from an earthquake spot that tore down bridges back in 1906. And to top all of that off, it would also have to be tall enough to let ships pass underneath it. Basically, many people thought it was just wishful thinking, but in the 1920s, technological advancements in bridge building and financial support for the project got people thinking, well, wait, okay, maybe, just maybe this might be possible. Spoiler alert guys, as you can tell from this video where I'm talking about the bridge itself, it was possible. They did it. At number 8 now, the Golden Gate Bridge has a very distinctive reddish orange colour and its official name is International Orange. It's the colour used by people when they want an object to stand out from its surroundings. NASA use it for their spacesuits, the NFL use it for their footballs, and the Tokyo Tower in Japan is the same colour to stand out to nearby aircraft. Even my shirt is kind of similar to that colour, like international orange colour. Basically, if visibility is low, international orange makes things stand out, so it makes sense that in the foggy San Francisco Bay Area, where ships pass through every day, they would paint the Golden Gate Bridge in this colour so that it would always be seen. A much better choice than Oompa Loompa Orange. Coming in at number 7 now, and let's talk about the Halfway to Hell Club. Now I know it might sound like a motorcycle gang, but it's not. The Halfway to Hell Club is the unofficial title for the men who fell from the bridge as they worked on its construction. They got saved by a safety net that cost $130,000 at the time. It was essentially the same sort of thing they use at circuses in case the performers fall, except this one was the size of the entire bridge. The Halfway to Hell Club consisted of 19 men who owed their lives to this net. If it wasn't there, they would have fallen the 200 feet into the icy waters below. Remember guys, safety first, always. On to number 6 now. The Golden Gate Bridge is visited by tourists all over the world at all times of the year. According to the Golden Gate Bridge District, it attracts around 10 million visitors every single year. Now the crowds mainly visit in summer to get the best views and the best weather. I mean, I don't blame them at all. The Golden Gate Bridge Welcome Center was renovated in 2011 to provide people with information, exhibitions and merchandise. In fact, they're so tourist friendly, they want you to experience it without ever having to actually visit it. Their website hosts a virtual bridge tour and exhibition. I haven't tried it yet, but I think I'd rather join the 10 million people who actually visit it for real. At number 5, the Golden Gate Bridge is often referred to as an American icon, and like other well-known American icons such as the Empire State Building or the Statue of Liberty, the Golden Gate Bridge has appeared in a ton of different movies over the years. In Superman the movie, we see a school bus saved from falling off the Golden Gate Bridge by Superman. We've seen James Bond battle Max Zorin on it in 1985, even the Hulk scrapped on it too back in 2003. It's even been destroyed by people, everyone from Magneto to Mega Shark in that forgotten classic Mega Shark vs Giant Octopus. If there's one thing that movie makers like doing more than putting iconic landmarks in their movies, it's destroying iconic landmarks in their movies. But at number 4, we're going to be talking about how the bridge really did almost get destroyed in real life. Now it wasn't by a supervillain or a giant shark, but it was by visitors who were just walking on it. When the bridge opened in 1937, the city let visitors walk on the bridge before opening it up to traffic. Years later, in May 1987, San Francisco held a celebration for the 50th anniversary of the bridge opening, and they wanted to do the same thing. However, they did not expect so many people to show up. Apparently 750,000 to 1 million people turned out, and poor crowd control meant that the bridge became congested with 300,000 people in the middle. Now the sheer weight of all these people started to flatten the bridge out, and it visibly sagged 10 feet in the middle. Sounds pretty terrifying? Because it pretty much is. One person who was there that day said they were glad that the crowd did not panic and stampede, otherwise it might have been one of the biggest tragedies in living memory. Alright guys, moving on to number 3 now, and in January 2014 it was estimated that more than 2 billion vehicles had crossed over the Golden Gate Bridge since it was opened in 1937. Now you have to pay a toll to use the bridge, so they can use that information to make very accurate estimations about how many people have passed over it every single year. Now we don't know who the 2 billionth driver was to go over the bridge recently, but they did take a guess at the 1 billionth. On February 22nd, 1985, they stopped a random car that was crossing the bridge on the day that the 1 billionth driver was said to pass over it. That driver was a dentist called Arthur Molinari, and he was declared the 1 billionth driver to cross the Golden Gate Bridge. He was even given a bridge construction hat and a case of champagne. I'm sure he had lots of fun with that. At number 2, the Golden Gate Bridge is actually the second most used suicide spot in the world. Now it's estimated that someone jumps to their death from the bridge once every 2 weeks. Since its completion, that total number sits at around the 1600 mark. There is even a suicide prevention initiative in place that promotes a special telephone for people who feel suicidal to call it, and in 2014, after years of petitions, the Golden Gate Bridge Board of Directors approved $76 million in funding for a 20-foot wide steel net that would extend for the entire length of the bridge, because it's thought that one of the main reasons why this is a suicide hotspot is that sadly it's just far too easy to jump that barrier into the waters below. But guys, let's try and not end on a sad note, because our number 1 is the fact that the Golden Gate Bridge is actually a wonder of the world. Now although most people watching this might think about the pyramids or Stonehenge when someone mentions wonders of the world, they're actually pretty ancient ones, and in 1994 the American Society of Civil Engineers came together to publish what they thought were the 7 wonders of the modern world. The Golden Gate Bridge made the list as one of the most remarkable civil engineering achievements of the 20th century. They praised it as the longest suspension bridge in the world from 1937 to 1964. Now that's not bad for a bridge that many people said would be flat out impossible to build. Now perhaps that is why it's the most famous bridge in the world. Not because it's the biggest or the longest bridge, but because people still see it as this impossible bridge that had stood the test of time for almost 80 years now.
In the 1930s, America was hit by a wave of organized crime. The FBI spent many years trying to catch and convict mobsters like Al Capone. When they finally arrested him, they had to make sure he stayed locked up. To contain this new breed of super gangster, the US government planned to build a super prison. They found the perfect location, an island in the middle of San Francisco Bay called Alcatraz. On the island was an old military fort sitting in a deep pit cut into the rock. Workers demolished the old building and built 3 stories of steel-reinforced concrete cell blocks on top. None of the 600 cells had any contact to the outer walls. They were a prison within a prison. Each cell was fitted with unbreakable steel gates, which had no keys, but could be opened remotely. Alcatraz was the biggest concrete structure in the world, and supposedly the most secure prison on the planet. Bob Luke arrived in Alcatraz in 1954, looking forward to 12 years on the rock.
The boat made a wide turn, and then I could see the island. And first I saw the houses down the bottom, and then looked up, and the prison was sitting up on top of the island. So that was my first glimpse of Alcatraz. It looked like to me like a French chateau, but I knew that this was an old country home. This was going to be my prison for several years. Of course, we all had heard of Alcatraz. It was going to be the end of the line.
Alcatraz was the last stop for America's most dangerous and violent offenders.
This is my mugshot. It was taken the first day I got here in April 1954. It was just a young thug that beat you up just as soon as look at you, hold up banks. I was a burglar, car thief, served 11 or 12 years in prison for all that. So I was a different guy.
To keep people like young Bob safely locked up, engineers fitted the cell doors with an extremely tough kind of prison bar.
When they opened the prison up in 1934, these all were done over with tool steels. You can't cut these bars, even if you had a hacksaw blade. They're impossible. There's a heavy, hardened tool steel inside this bar. I used to come in at 12 o'clock at midnight and walk these tiers counting, and I always felt fairly safe, you know.
The doors weren't just unbreakable, they locked without keys. They gave a whole new meaning to the term, the slammer.
We've got 13 doors that we can open from this one box. And the officer would yell down the row here, rack 'em, just giving them a heads up that the doors are going to be closing. That's where you get the true sound of the slammer. Rack 'em! And this is part of the punishments of Alcatraz here in this door, open and close every day.
So the first time you hear that door slam, it's like being entombed. You know, you just know that this is going to be it for a while.
Right.
Alcatraz looked like the perfect prison, a concrete fortress brimming with technology. It didn't even need a fence around it, as it was surrounded by the icy currents of San Francisco Bay.
When I used to work the towers, I used to see logs maybe 8, 9 feet long going out with the tide as if it had an outboard motor on it. Out it would go.
Oh, sure, I wanted to try to escape from anywhere, but I always thought it was impossible to try here, so I just give up even, you know, thinking about it.
Despite all the technology at Alcatraz, 3 inmates went missing in 1962. All that was left of them were 3 dummies made of soap, toilet paper, and hair stolen from the barbershop. And of course, the big holes they had scraped into the concrete walls of their cells with a spoon.
The cells are back to back with a corridor in between. Nothing but pipes. They crawl right up to the top. And once they got up there, they can't be seen. It must have took a year or 2 years of continuous planning. Kind of amazing how that was allowed to happen.
Despite a massive search operation, there was no trace of the prisoners.
I don't believe anyone ever escaped from Alcatraz. Most people don't realize the closest these inmates ever got to water was to take a shower. Now you could imagine panic-stricken 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, jumping into that bay. No way. My impression is that if they got into the water, they may have got out 100 yards or so and then goodbye.
Whether the men escaped or not, the fate of Alcatraz was sealed. An investigation revealed that the supposedly escape-proof concrete was to blame for the breakout. Alcatraz used seawater to flush the toilets. It trickled from leaky pipes and seeped into the walls. Brick chips in the concrete soaked up the water and swelled like sponges, wedging open fissures. Eventually, the reinforcing steel bars started to rust and expand, and the concrete cracked even more. After 30 years, the formerly super strong walls were so crumbly that they weren't even a match for a spoon. The leaky concrete would have cost millions to repair. So in 1963, Alcatraz closed its doors for the last time. But the lessons from the rock live on.
Naval Legends. In this episode, the invulnerable Hornet. While the Pacific Campaign was in full swing, the US Navy started receiving new Essex-class heavy aircraft carriers. They became the long-awaited reinforcements that helped the Americans crush the Japanese Imperial fleet. One of the most famous ships of this class, CV-12 Hornet, inherited her name from another aircraft carrier that distinguished herself at the start of the war. In April 1942, 4 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Americans prepared a bold and daring operation. 16 ground-based B-25 Army bombers had been brought aboard aircraft carrier CV-8 Hornet, which sailed towards the Japanese islands.
That was to let the Japanese know that you bomb our homeland, you come close to our homeland, we'll come to you. They literally sent the B-25s off of an aircraft carrier, something that had never been done before, and it was a one-way mission. They didn't have enough fuel to get back.
The Doolittle raid inspired Americans and strengthened their belief in victory over Japan. In September 1942, CV-8 Hornet received serious damage during the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands and sank. However, its famous name was given to a new aircraft carrier, CV-12, that was under construction at the Newport News shipyard.
The keel was laid in 1942, and a year and a month later, in 1943, the ship was underway. A remarkable production in 1 year, especially when you realize it was done without computers, just slide rules and blueprints. 24 of these ships were produced during the Second World War. It's amazing to consider that.
General performance capabilities of USS Hornet. Total displacement up to 36,000 tons. Length up to 266 meters. Beam 45 meters. Draft at full load 9.1 meters. Armament 59 Oerlikon cannons. Caliber 20 millimeters. 10 quadruple Mark II Bofors guns. Caliber 40 millimeters. 12 Mark 12 dual-purpose guns. Caliber 127 millimeters. Armor, main belt and beam bulkheads 102 millimeters. Hangar deck 64 millimeters. The air group consisted of 4 squadrons with up to 103 aircraft in total. Hellcat fighters, Helldiver dive bombers, Avenger torpedo bombers. Maximum speed up to 33 knots. Cruising range 15,000 miles.
So, an aircraft carrier is a heavy attack ship. It's a floating airfield, but at the same time, the aircraft carrier itself becomes a main target for enemy attacks. It became clear, to prevail at sea, one must destroy aircraft carriers. Accordingly, in addition to every aircraft carrier being heavily armed with anti-aircraft defenses, they were covered by Allied ships. For example, USS Hornet had up to 60 guns of various anti-aircraft artillery aboard.
All anti-aircraft weapons on board. All of our weapons were devoted to anti-aircraft. The single-barrel guns could put between 6 and 10 rounds of explosive anti-aircraft shells in the air per minute. So you multiply that times 12, that's a lot of shells in the air. We could put up a lead curtain that kept most of the attacking aircraft away. The closest a kamikaze fighter ever got was cartwheeling over the deck into the water and never hit us with a bomb or the aircraft itself.
But even with this colossal number of guns, the main anti-aircraft weapon of an aircraft carrier is its fighter aviation.
The striking force of an aircraft carrier consisted of bombers and torpedo bombers, whose range was many times greater than that of the artillery of modern battleships of the time.
The very first aircraft carriers built after World War I showed that no matter how powerful booster engines were on planes, the flight deck was too short for them to gain the necessary speed. Then the idea appeared that aircraft should have an additional method for acceleration.
Now, they can't do it by themselves. They have to have assistance through the catapult system. This cable that's hooked up underneath the wing goes down, wraps around the front of that shuttle down below, and that shuttle runs in this track out to the front of the ship. There's a hydraulic engine rammed way down below that is powering this thing. And at that point, the plane is doing about 120 to 130 knots. It's a rather exciting start.
Right after takeoff, pilots had exhausting work to do. The tension was growing with every mile of flight, and when they arrived at the target area, it would become immense.
The pilots were aware of the risks they took in flying over the enemy territory and in combat there. And then as they got back to the ship, they'd tend to relax because now they feel safe, but they should always remember that one of the most challenging and dangerous things they're going to do is land back aboard this ship.
An aircraft has a very high speed when landing. If it attempts to land by itself, it will just roll along the deck and fall off the other edge. That's why the question arose, how do we stop this?
This area, and there's 4 of these on either side of the deck where the cables would stretch out, and down below decks there's a bunch of equipment they're being tensioned, and they know how much the plane weighs that's coming in, so they actually tension the wire for the weight of that plane. And so as it comes in, they grab the hook and they will stop before they get to the end of this angled deck here, which is only another couple hundred feet beyond this touchdown area. Once they touch down and stop, they retract their hook, the cable is retracted, it's set for the next plane. It's often only 30 seconds between aircraft landing.
Some airplanes were much easier to land on board than others. And the particular airplane that I flew, the F-8 Crusader, was a difficult airplane to land. Ship that we're landing on is moving through the water, and we don't always have calm seas or good visibility and such as that. So it was necessary to land sometimes at night. Maybe we're in rough seas and the whole deck is heaving and swaying. If the ship has to go faster to accommodate the landings on the ship, very often stack gas that comes out of the stacks drift across the landing area, and it interrupts your smooth flight on board to the ship.
There was a peculiarity during World War II. When landing on a deck, pilots had to drop all ammunition remaining after an attack down into the sea. Why? Because the accident rate was high. Pilots were landing by themselves after all. There wasn't any guidance, radio navigation, nothing at all. They had to do it all by themselves. They were tired and exhausted. If the worst happened and an aircraft crash landed, its whole ammunition stock would explode.
It's a very precise maneuver to land on these, and any interruption of that can result, of course, in a crash or a near crash. It's a point of pride that we were able to do that and do it consistently well.
This ship went through something around 200,000 landings before it was decommissioned. So it's a round-the-clock process, round the clock.
I lived on board ships like this for a total of 29 months, so I'm intimately familiar with the flight deck of the aircraft carrier.
The Hornet aircraft carrier was commissioned in 1943. The United States had the advantage in the Pacific theater of operations by that time, but their enemy was still extremely dangerous. A raid by a carrier task force could be compared to a royal hunt. The Queen is escorted by several dozen ships of different types, from fuel transports to battleships. Crews are at battle stations. Scouts are sweeping hundreds of square miles of ocean looking for prey.
My favorite room on the Hornet, this is Combat Information Center. In this room, all of the sensors for the Hornet come into this room. All of the radars, sonar information, electronic warfare information, it's all flowing into this room, and they're figuring out what needs to be filtered out and acted upon and passed up to the bridge for action.
A scouting report comes in. The enemy was detected. That's it. The flag officer gives the order to attack. What does that involve? Launching an aircraft or a group of aircraft from a carrier? It all starts from the top, the speed and direction of the wind.
We're now in the aerology office, otherwise known as the weather office for the ship. And there was a crew here 24 hours a day keeping an eye on the weather. Big thing for an aircraft carrier is how fast is the wind. So they're constantly monitoring that. They're even sending off weather balloons from them just outside this office to keep track of some of the upper atmospheric conditions that are going on.
The commanding officer of the task force, the flag officer, Admiral, gives the order. Prepare for takeoff. The flagship navigator calculates the course necessary for aircraft to take off. The aircraft carrier turns around. Accordingly, the whole formation turns around.
And that's basically controlled by two enlisted men right here at these stations. Obviously, this is the wheel, and this is the ship's steering wheel. And what's going on is the operator is watching his compass, his gyro compass repeater. He's getting orders from one of the officers out there in the bridge to steer a certain course.
The ships have turned around. Then the work on the flight deck starts. The deck gets cleaned. They remove all debris, bolts, dirt, and garbage. Maybe there's some ice or dew. They get removed too. Then comes the hangar service unit. Elevators come up, aircraft get rolled out, and at the same time, the oil and lubricants unit starts to bring fuel hoses and tanks to the upper deck. And all these people, about 2,000 crewmen, just to make it possible for 10 aircraft to take off. Take off. Everything works. Everything flies. very complex procedure. And by 1943, the Americans mastered it. As the saying goes, they knew it like the back of their hand.
However, not one of the carrier's crew indulged in illusions. Everyone understood that experience, discipline, and excellent organization might not be enough to protect against an enemy torpedo or bomb.
The last room I wanted to show you was all the way here in the back, and it actually required another combination to get into. You had to have top secret clearance to get into this room. Now, it sounds exciting. The information that's being printed on these teletype machines is classified top secret. It's a warship. If the ship got hit, it's being sunk, you're in enemy territory. You would take the most important security things, put them in the bags, which are weighted very heavy at the bottom with a steel plate, and then you head outside and toss it over into the ocean, and it'll sink, and hopefully the other guys don't get it then.
The attack on Pearl Harbor showed the high efficiency of aircraft carriers. In accordance with the traditions of Eastern philosophy, Americans learned the lesson that the enemy had taught them and started beating the Japanese at their own game. Every day, commanding officers of task forces resolved issues and set in motion enormous amounts of resources, without realizing that they lay the foundations of new naval warfare tactics.
In general, we're talking about Essex-class carriers. Hornet is one of them. They are attack ships. An operation is carried out, ammunition and fuel are used up. The next operation won't start until these ships return to base and get more fuel, ammunition, food and water, as well as new aircraft and new pilots. We are preparing a new general engagement, while the Americans are. When? The day those aircraft and aircraft carriers are ready. The day when the Hornet is ready.
Having participated in dozens of battles, Hornet had to pass the final exam. In the face of inevitable defeat, the Japanese Fleet Command decided to go all in. Battleship Yamato was sent to stop the Americans. April 7, 1945 became a day to remember for Hornet and 7 other U.S. aircraft carriers.
Task Force 58 was huge. It consisted of 5 heavy and 3 light aircraft carriers. Imagine 227 aircraft of the attack wave taking off. 227 aircraft attacking. Everyone found their positions in their air groups. This whole wave arrived at the target. Orders were coming from ships. From the flagship, the aircraft attacked. They attacked from different directions simultaneously. The Japanese couldn't do anything about it. Battleship Yamato was defenseless against such a well-organized air attack. The strike was delivered, the ship was destroyed, the aircraft flew back. One by one, they left their formation, found their aircraft carrier, landed, and all this without hindering other pilots. The destruction of Yamato was the pinnacle of the U.S. Navy's airstrike organization.
This operation put an end to the Japanese Imperial Fleet. Several months later, the empire itself fell as well.
We were at Hunters Point Naval Shipyard and just finished our sea trials, sea readiness trials, and World War II ended. We became the lead ship in Operation Magic Carpet. This is how we got our guys home from over there. We didn't have any way to fly them home, so all naval ships were pressed into service. What they did is they welded 3,000 bunks to the hangar deck of all the aircraft carriers, Hornet being the first. It's a 9-day trip from the Pacific Theater back to Pearl Harbor, where we took our guys. We were luxury accommodations. We did have a visitor some years ago who was aboard during that time. And he told us the story of it. And the story was, you got 1 meal a day, You were either in your bed, in a line to go to the bathroom, or a line to get chow. That was it. That was your routine for 9 days, and that was the entire ship's crew as well, in addition to doing their jobs. But the passengers particularly, they were happy to be going home, but they were fairly bored on the way home.
The Hornet's biography is the history of the Pacific War. She took part in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and the attack on Yamato in April 1945. Today, the aircraft carrier is one of the most popular attractions in California and a reminder of the heroic past of the U.S. Navy.
She had an enviable record, one of the best records in World War II. She fought in 59 battles and was never hit by a bomb, never hit by a torpedo, never hit by a kamikaze. During all that time, she was considered one of the luckiest ships in the Navy.
It was the gold rush of 1849 that really opened up California to the world. Gold miners made and lost riches within a few years, but the merchants that supplied the miners were the ones who earned the enduring wealth. The origin of Silicon Valley's focus on technology goes back to the founding of Stanford University. A consummate entrepreneur, Leland Stanford, who made his first fortune selling picks and shovels to gold miners, then risked it all again to build the Central Pacific Railroad, connecting California with the East Coast. Stanford later became California's Civil War governor and one of the largest landowners in the state. When his only child, Leland Stanford Jr., died, he and his wife, Jane Lathrop, decided to devote their entire fortune towards the building of a great university, a place of learning that would strive to teach practical knowledge. In Stanford University's early years, tuition was free. As the university prospered, its students and faculty often engaged in entrepreneurial endeavors. Many of these were connected to advances in technology.